Chuck Schumer's voice, a venomous whisper in the gilded hallway, cut through the air. "You don't belong here, Trump. This is for patriots, not performers." Before Donald Trump could even respond, a new voice, shaking with grief but forged in steel, sliced through the tension like a blade. "How dare you!" The Liberty and Valor Gala was Washington, D.C. at its most solemn. The grand ballroom of the Mayflower Hotel was a sea of decorated uniforms, black ties, and elegant gowns, all bathed in a soft, respectful golden light. The air wasn't filled with the usual political chatter, but with the quiet dignity of remembrance. This was a night for the families of fallen police officers, a sacred space where grief and honor walked hand in hand. When Donald Trump arrived, a ripple went through the room, but it wasn't the usual wave of media frenzy and loud proclamations. He entered with a quiet gravity that many had never seen. His shoulders were set, his gaze direct, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a deep, palpable respect. He wasn't working the room like a politician. He was moving through it like a man paying a debt of gratitude. He spent long minutes with a retired chief of police, his hand on the man's shoulder, listening intently. He knelt to speak to the young son of a slain detective, the boy clutching a folded American flag, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't a performance, it was a pilgrimage. Across the ballroom, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer watched from his table, his lips curled into a disdainful sneer. He saw every handshake, every quiet word, not as an act of compassion, but as a calculated political maneuver. To Schumer, Trump was a virus in this sacred space, and his very presence was an insult. He saw an opportunity, a chance to land a blow where Trump seemed most vulnerable, to expose the perceived fraud behind the solemn facade. After an hour, Trump excused himself, stepping away from a conversation with a Gold Star family. He walked into a quiet, ornate hallway, a long corridor lined with portraits of American presidents, seeking a brief moment of peace away from the emotional weight of the room. He paused before a large, intricate memorial plaque, listing the names of officers lost in the line of duty. He traced a finger over one of the engraved names, his head bowed in thought. That's when he heard the soft, expensive click of Italian leather shoes on the marble floor behind him. "Donald," Trump turned. Chuck Schumer stood there, a predatory smile playing on his lips, his eyes cold and calculating. "I have to admit," Schumer began, his voice dripping with faux congeniality, "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought this event might be a little too dignified for your usual tastes." Trump's expression remained unreadable, a mask of calm strength. "It's a beautiful event, Chuck," he replied, his voice even, "for men and women who deserve every ounce of our respect." Schumer took a step closer, the pretense of civility evaporating, replaced by a low, malicious arrogance. He was in his element now. The back room, the quiet hallway, the place where the real daggers came out. "Respect?" he scoffed, the word a puff of poison in the air. "You wouldn't know the meaning of the word. This is all a performance, isn't it? A cheap photo op for your next campaign ad." Trump's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady. "These families don't care about politics tonight, Chuck. They care about their loved ones. Maybe you should try to remember that." The calm reply only seemed to fuel Schumer's ire. He was expecting a brawl, a shouting match he knew he could spin to the media. Trump's composure was a rejection of the fight Schumer so desperately wanted to provoke. He moved closer still, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, villainous hiss. "Oh, I know what this is about," Schumer seethed. "You think standing next to these grieving families makes you look strong. You think wrapping yourself in the flag and pretending to care about these heroes absolves you of everything. But you don't care about them. They're just props to you. You have no idea what their sacrifice means. You don't belong here." The accusation hung in the silent hallway, thick and ugly. Trump inhaled, his jaw tightening. The hero inside him, the fighter, was ready to unleash a verbal torrent that would peel the paint from the walls. He was ready to dissect Schumer's entire career of political maneuvering, to expose him right there in the hollowed halls of the establishment he so clearly loved. But he never got the chance. The door to an adjacent private reception room clicked open. A woman stepped out, her face a portrait of elegant sorrow. She was Elena Sanchez, the widow of decorated SWAT officer Ricardo Sanchez, a man who had died shielding his team from a gunman just 1 year ago. She had been sitting in the quiet room with her 2 teenage children, trying to gather the strength to get through the evening, and she had heard everything. She looked directly at the Senate Majority Leader. Her voice, though trembling, was clear and sharp. "Senator Schumer?" Schumer froze, a deer caught in the headlights. The arrogant mask on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. He hadn't seen her. He was trapped. Elena Sanchez took a slow, deliberate step forward. She ignored Trump completely, her entire focus, her entire being, aimed like a laser at the senator. "I heard what you said," she began, her voice gaining strength with every word. "You stand here in your expensive suit, in a hallway named for presidents, and you talk about respect. You talk about who belongs here." She took another step. "Let me tell you about respect, Senator. A week after my husband was killed, my family was shattered. My phone rang constantly with calls from staffers, assistants, and public relations people, all offering generic, pre-written condolences. I received a form letter from your office with your name stamped at the bottom. It was cold. It was empty. It meant nothing." Schumer's face had gone pale. He tried to speak, to formulate an apology, but his throat was dry. "Then," Elena continued, her voice now ringing with righteous power, "one night, my personal cell phone rang. It was an unlisted number. I almost didn't answer. But I did. And the voice on the other end said, 'Hello, Elena, this is Donald Trump.'" She looked past Schumer for a brief second, meeting Trump's eyes with a look of profound gratitude before turning her furious gaze back on the senator. He wasn't calling with a team of reporters. There were no cameras. There was no political agenda. He just called. He told me he had read about my Ricardo and that he was a hero of the highest order. He didn't talk about himself. He asked about my children. He asked what their father was like. He listened, Senator. For almost an hour, he just listened to a grieving widow tell stories about the man she loved. Tears were now streaming down Elena's face, but they were tears of fury, not of weakness. Her voice rose, echoing in the hallway. And before he hung up, he told me his foundation would be setting up a college fund for my 2 children, to ensure their father's sacrifice would be honored with a future he fought to protect. He did that, not his staff. Him. She was now standing directly in front of Schumer, her small frame radiating an immense, unshakable power. "You stand here and you use my family's pain as a weapon in a cheap political ambush. You accuse him of using us as props, when you are the one who is so hollow, so craven, that you would desecrate a night like this with your venom. He showed us compassion. He showed us honor. You, Senator Schumer, have shown us nothing but the empty black heart of a politician. You are the one who doesn't belong here." The silence that followed was deafening. Schumer was broken. His arrogance was shattered, his malice exposed. He stood there, speechless and humiliated, stripped bare by the raw, undeniable truth of a hero's widow. From the far end of the hallway, a man lowered his cell phone, his eyes wide with disbelief. He was a young reporter for a local D.C. paper who had stepped out to take a call. He hadn't just heard the confrontation. He had witnessed the execution. Schumer, without another word, turned and fled, disappearing back into the noise of the gala. His defeat, total and absolute. Trump watched him go, then turned to Elena Sanchez, his expression one of pure, heartfelt empathy. "Your husband was a giant of a man, Elena," he said softly. "The honor was all mine." The reporter approached cautiously, his notepad now in hand. "Mr. Trump, I witnessed that." Donald Trump simply looked at him, his gaze firm and clear, and gave a single knowing nod. "You witnessed the truth." The next morning, the story wasn't about the gala. It was about the clash in the hallway. It wasn't about politics. It was about character. Elena Sanchez's words were on every news site. A testament to true compassion versus cynical malice. Schumer was engulfed in a firestorm of his own making, while Trump, without throwing a single punch, had won a profound victory of morality and honor. What did you think of the way Elena Sanchez confronted the senator? Share your thoughts on her powerful words below. For more stories that reveal the character behind the conflict, be sure to subscribe.